Someone asked me if I could fix these machines up for them, and right off the bat I can see a lot of problems with these machines, so I took this opportunity to show you a couple of problem solvers and some things you want to look for if you are buying a machine that is mass produced. It's not from a machine builder, or it hasn't been tuned by a tattoo artist. You can buy these machines, but you need to know what to look for and how to tune them correctly, because they do not come tuned, and a lot of times they do not come with the correct parts on them. Now these ones have been used, and it looks like somebody has switched out some of the parts with just some hardware that they found, and it's not the correct parts. And these also look pretty rough. Somebody hasn't been taking care of these. Right off the bat, you can see that this tube vise is bent, and that's because this is a really thin frame and someone's been handling this incorrectly and they have bent the tube vise. Something I look for if I'm going to buy a mass-produced machine is a machine that has a thicker frame. That's a little sturdier frame. It'll suck up some of the vibration. You can work with it more. These little flimsy frames, you can't do a lot with them. They can get bent, and I just don't personally like these types of frames. This style is okay, but if it needs to be a better frame, a thicker frame in this style. You can see that this armature bar is not correct. When your armature bar hits your front coil, it should be level. And you can see this is hitting the rear coil, and it's not even hitting the front coil. So that tells me that this rear coil is way too high. You can also see this is loose. There's a broken wire. This machine is just really jacked up. Not everybody is rich when they first start tattooing. You might start off with these mass-produced machines. You always want to improve your equipment and get better equipment. You can go to a home builder who knows what they're doing and get a machine like this for $100 that's built a lot better. Or you can find a builder, a professional builder, who will sell to you and get a machine for $100 or $200 that will last you 4 or 5 years, maybe even more. These machines, I'm guessing, probably $20 from Amazon, and you can see the condition they're in. Even though they're cheap machines, there's no excuse for them to be in this kind of condition. You need to take care of your equipment. You never want to just throw these things in a backpack or your pocket, because it will jack your machine up, it will bend your frame. If you have it tuned, it might move your contact screw and put your machine out of tune. Let's do some problem solvers on this first machine. Let's fix this machine up. You can see that someone just put a steel screw in here, which steel is not the best material for conducting electricity. This is a part that helps conduct electricity. So we're going to switch that out. There's no retaining screw to hold the contact screw in place. There's way too much tension on this rear spring, and you can see when the armature bar is level, it's not even touching these coils, the top of the front coil. The frame is bent, so first thing we're going to do is take this apart and bend the frame back. You can get one of these fairly cheap, and it's a screwdriver that you can change out the heads. And this way you can sit here and take apart a tattoo machine without hunting down a tool every time you need one. You can also get some Allen wrenches, one of these that comes with all the different sizes you need. All of those will come in handy if you are tuning or putting together tattoo machines. You can see when I'm taking this apart that I am putting my thumb on the coil. That way the coil doesn't spin around when I loosen this up, because we don't want to break that wire like this when that coil spins around. So put a little pressure on it with your thumb and take that off. I like to loosen everything up first before I take it off. Don't take it all the way off, just loosen it up. You can see on this shoulder washer that it is cracked already, and that happens when you tighten this up too much. So you need to be careful of that, because when this cracks, your screw will make contact with your frame and it'll short out the machine. So make sure you use a nice thick shoulder washer, and make sure you don't split it when you tighten up your front post here. Before you take off these coils, get a couple of rubber bands and put it around the coil. This will hold them together so they don't move around as much. So first thing I did when I got everything off was I bent the frame straight. I put my screwdriver in here, twisted it, and then put it in my vise. And then I'm going to run a tube through here to make sure everything lines up, which it does. So that's fixed. Now I'm going to clean this dirty frame. This is a magnet, and you can see that it sticks to this frame. So this is a steel frame, not aluminum. So that lets me know I can heat this up if I want to without melting it, or I can come up with some kind of finish to put on this. And I know it's made out of steel. The way they do these is they cut these out and then they just bend them into place. That's why they're so easy to bend, because it's really thin material, and they just put it in a machine that kind of stamps this out. Okay, so I heated this up, and you can see when you heat up steel, you can change the colors on it. You can get some little purples and kind of copper and blues on your steel, which looks a lot cooler than the way it was. When you buy coils for a machine, you have to make sure you get the right coils and the right height on the coils. When your armature bar is on, it needs to hit the front core and be level so that the needle will travel down the middle of the tube, not at an angle like this if it's too high, but once this is level, it'll go straight down the middle of the tube. You don't want an angle on your needle, and you don't want this armature bar hitting your coils weird. You want it to sit flush on the front core, which this is your coils, this is your core right here. So make sure you buy the right size coils for the machine. You can measure the distance between your deck here and the rear deck and see what size cores you need. For a different machine, I would buy coils that are the right size. Make sure I measure the distance of the core and get the correct size. For these little cheap machines, what I did was, these were too long, so I took my file and I filed them down so that they were the correct size. They're a lot shorter. Because this metal is steel, I do not need a yoke. Because this frame is aluminum, I do need a yoke for this one. The different frames have their benefits and drawbacks. Your steel frame, you don't need a yoke, but it will rust quicker. So you need to treat these steel frames so that they won't rust. Aluminum frames don't rust. Aluminum doesn't rust. So talking about the different materials, this screw that someone put in here is a steel screw, which you want to use steel screws on your machine, but not for your contact screw. You have to think about the screw and what the purpose is. Brass will conduct electricity more. This is for conducting electricity, so you want a brass or a silver screw. This metal is typically softer, and you don't want to use this to hold your cores in because you're going to tighten those down. You could possibly strip the threading on this screw, but that's not the purpose for the screw. You have to think of the purpose. The purpose for this is for electricity, so you want this to be brass because it conducts electricity. The purpose of the screws on the bottom of your machine are to hold your cores in place, so you want these nice and strong, nice and tight. And your cores are made out of steel, so you want a steel screw to make these stronger. And they hollow out these cores, so you have this big gap in there. If you put a steel screw in there, that gives you more material, which gives you more magnetism. So for these screws, you don't want to put these tiny screws that come with the machine in there because they leave a lot of gap. There's a lot of air in there. Get a longer screw that will fill up that gap and it will improve the quality of your cores. It'll give it more magnetism. You will have to use less voltage to get this to work. Now I'm going to put all the parts back on the machine, but I'm not going to tighten anything down. What I'm going to do is just get everything on there so I can adjust it and tune the machine correctly. Now, another issue is these cores are not the best cores, and the rear spring that's on here is really thick and really hard to bend. So when you have weak cores and this gap back here is so small and this is so hard of a spring, you can't pull down on this. So that's going to tax out these cores, make them heat up because they have to work really hard to pull on this. So when you have a really hard spring like this, you either need to loosen it up a little bit, run the machine, get this to flex a little bit more, or you need to put a thinner spring on the back that will not be so hard to pull down. And you won't have to use as much voltage to pull this down, and your little cheap machine won't heat up on you. So this machine came with this little cheapy round washer. But what I'm going to do is I have this piece of scrap metal here that's the correct size for this. So I'm going to cut out a washer and make a washer of my own that fits on here, so I'll have a nice little square washer for this machine. So if you get a stripped screw on your machine, don't put it back on there. Throw it away, get a new one. Now you can see that these armature bars are made differently. This one has removed the material from the top of the armature bar to make it lighter. This armature bar is just a solid armature bar. The lighter the bar, the faster your machine will run. Now, you want to have as much material on the bottom of your armature bar so it will be attracted to the top of your cores. So if you want to make your machine faster, you can adjust the weight of your armature bar. Now, if you decide to take some weight off of your armature bar at your house, do it yourself, make sure you take it off of the top. You can grind off the top part, but you want to leave the bottom alone so that you have a lot of material that will be attracted to your cores. So also look at the length of your armature bar, because it has to be the correct length. You want it to go over your cores but also hit right in the middle of your tube. So you can adjust that accordingly and then adjust the weight so that you can get it either slower or faster. On these little cheapies, I like to put silicone on the bottom here because these little wires will touch your frames, and the silicone will also keep your coils from moving around and stop a little bit of the vibration. So I want to do this on all of the machines, but on these little cheapies I do this. And what you want to do is just get it on the bottom. Don't put it over your cores. And this will dry up real quick, and I can slap this back on the machine. Alrighty, so that's all you do, and then we're going to let this dry and put it on the machine. Okay, so these coils, the outside wire broke. The inside wire is a little more difficult to deal with, but if your outside wire breaks, you can pull it out, trying not to let this unwind, keep some pressure on the wire so the whole thing doesn't come loose on you. Now we are going to unwind a little bit of this wire like so, and then we're going to stick it back through the hole and hook it up again. See how that works? So we're just going to lose a little bit of wire, but we're going to get enough to where we have plenty of wire to hook up again. So everything is put together. You get to go through the process of tuning it and lining everything up. You want to make sure that you have a little bit of a gap in the rear between your rear core and your armature bar, which you can use a feeler gauge stock to check your gap. This is 0.010 or 0.254 millimeters is what I've read is recommended for your rear gap, or a dollar bill. You know, you just want a thin gap here, because if you don't have that gap, what'll happen is your armature bar will stick to your coils more, and you don't want that. You want it to release once it comes down. So you would check your gap, make sure everything is lined up and that it goes into your tube correctly. So then once everything's put together, you would just tighten everything up, and then you get to go through the process of tuning the machine. You can see you can take a cheap machine that doesn't work and is busted up and turn it into a decent machine if you have the correct parts for it and you know how to work on machines and tune them. If you don't know how to tune machines, make sure you buy nice machines that are tuned already by someone who knows what they're doing. And if you're buying cheap machines, you better learn how to fix them. So hopefully those tips will help you out. Don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed this, and subscribe if you want to keep watching more videos like this.